Hello, you amazing people. It is Riley LH here with another video, and we are back with the turbo-ish Miata, and we have 22-ish days until we have to leave to drive 24 hours out to No Coast, which means we have to get all of this done. Well, not that's things I want to do, but we have to get all of that done. So we're going to be working on the Miata today, like I just said, and we're going to work on our oil and water lines. So we're going to be drilling a hole in our oil pan, we're going to be tapping off our high pressure oil zone on our 1.6 block right there, and as well we're going to do water lines because this is a water cooled turbo and not just an oil cooled turbo. Which means we have to cut into this line, I think, and go from there to the turbo and there to the turbo. But first, we're going to start working on a high-pressure oil zone. We can't drill our oil pan yet because I don't have the MPT tap. This fitting came in my T3/T4 oil turbo kit on eBay. And one side is 10 AN, the other side is 1/2 inch MPT. So that's just going to go right there. We're going to drill and tap straight into our oil pan. But yeah, I don't have the tap for that, so we're going to go ahead and start with our water lines and our high pressure oil line. Now the 1.6 Miatas have an advantage over the 1.8 Miatas, and that is there's a high pressure oil port right on the side of the block, because if you did not know, this engine was in another Mazda, which was a front wheel drive turbo car. Now with the 1.8s, they did get rid of that high pressure oil zone in the block, so you have to tap off the oil pressure fitting or do an oil sandwich plate. I already have an oil sandwich plate, so if I did have a 1.8, I could just tap off that. But right down there where you see my socket is, let me get a light. Okay, correction, now you can see. Right down there where my socket is, that is a high pressure oil port, and we're simply just going to take that off. It's a 14 millimeter, we snap that off, and then we can go in ahead and put in our oil line. We're simply just going to break this loose, and then we'll go ahead and replace that with our fitting for our line. Ow. Okay, so now that we busted our knuckles, this will just come straight out. Okay, now that that's out, we're going to put in our fitting. Now, I'm pretty sure this fitting actually came in the kit with my oil line off eBay, so let's hope this actually fits. The thread seems to be the same. I don't think I can get a socket on there, but I can definitely get a wrench. Okay, now that it's all the way on there, we're going to give it a good little twist. Make sure we're not stripping it out, but make sure that is tight and that crush washer is crushed. So now that that's tight, we can actually install our oil line. Now, thinking about it now, I probably should have installed the line on the fitting first because, yeah, this doesn't rotate, so that means I have to spin the whole line around to get this on. Okay, correction. I'm not putting this oil line on first. I had to take it off to go and put some liquid Teflon on, and instead of trying to screw that in via the line first, I decided to go screw in here first, and yeah, cheap eBay parts snapped. So, yeah, that snapped in my block. Luckily, it's sticking out, so I should be able to get that out. Just gonna have to hammer it and hope for the best. Maybe get a left-handed drill bit, which I actually think I have a couple of. So, I'm gonna get that out, and then we'll work on coolant lines, and I'll order a new one. Yay. Make sure you put on the line last. Just make sure that doesn't start cross-threading. Okay, so I just took a break to order that fitting for the block, and now that we can't do either of the oil lines, we're going to go ahead and start on these coolant lines. I can't really do that much to them besides just take this silicone hose off and replace it with another longer hose. And then we're going to work on, I don't even know what now. Okay, so we got those hose clamps loose, and these should just come straight off. Okay, not after spilling a crap ton of coolant. Only if I had two hands in the shop right now. Okay, so now that we have a bucket under there, we can actually take this off. I thought I had most of the coolant out, but apparently not. Okay, so now we're going to plug this hole real quick before we lose all the coolant in the system. And we're going to tighten up this hose clamp, and that will be one of our water lines. Okay, so now that we have our one coolant hose on, we're going to put another right there. If we come over to your thermostat, there's one hose that comes down and over your intake, and there's one that comes from here down to there. That shorter hose, what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate that hose, and we're going to replace it with one hose that goes from your thermostat to the coolant inlet of your turbo, from the coolant outlet of the turbo to that point right there. And that will tie in your turbo into your coolant system, and I've seen a lot of people do it that way, so that's the way I'm going to do it. I haven't seen anybody do it any other way. And how to connect this up to your turbo, you have to get a barbed fitting like this that will thread into your turbo, and then it will have this barbed fitting on this side, which then will just go into the line, and you put a hose clamp on it. So several days later, and 2 fittings later, we finally have the right fitting. Now that we have our high pressure oil port in, we need oil to be able to come out. So it's time to do arguably one of the scariest parts of turboing Miata. Now, I'm not horribly scared of this. Yes, I'm a little bit nervous, but I should be good. And this fitting is what we're going to be tapping in. It's a 4AN or 10AN, I forget which one it is, to 3/8 NPT. So I got this kit off Amazon with a bunch of NPT taps because honestly I use a good bit of them. For instance, both these fittings right here are NPT. So it's something that's good to just have lying around. But you also need a drill bit to go with your tap. You're supposed to use like a 27th 32nd bit or something, which would be very hard for me to get in a timely manner. So I just picked this up yesterday. It's a 3/4 drill bit, which is like 0. But let's go ahead and get this on. So first off, we're going to come to the front of the oil pan, and we're simply just going to figure out where we want this. We want that about right there. Now we're going to go ahead and mark that with like a Sharpie or something. So now that we have a rough outline, we're just going to roughly mark up our center point. This doesn't have to be exactly precise if you leave some wiggle room. And now we can go ahead and center punch and start drilling that. Now we're going to tap the oil pan. I'm going to do it a little bit lower than where I marked, just to make my life drilling a little bit easier. And that's more commonly where I see people put it. So let's go ahead and get our tap in here and our hammer. Okay, so now that we have that center punch, we can go in with a small drill bit. I do also still have all the oil in my oil pan, so I can just simply flush all the oil out and all the metal shavings will come out. As well, I put a stop on the drill bit so once it hits in, it doesn't go any farther past the oil pan. And then we're also going to take some grease and some paper towels so we can go ahead and dip the drill bit in the grease so all the metal shavings get stuck to the drill bit, and then paper towels to clean them off. Get comfortable because we're about to take this real slow. So we just busted through and that stopped work perfect. And we're actually not leaking all of our oil out, which I'm kind of surprised about. So I guess now we're going to go ahead and start drilling with the 3/4 drill bit. So we have the 3/4 drill bit, and of course there's a stop on it. Now we're just going to dip it in some grease, just like so. That was a little bit excessive, but hey, better more than none. So now let's start drilling the oil pan. So we are through, and I definitely got a couple shavings in there, but we're going to put some grease on our finger, try to tap around in there and bring it all out. So you only want to go and put it in about halfway if you're using an NPT tap like I am, because what NPT means is that the threads are tapered, which means it's like a triangle. So the deeper you go in, the more it spreads out. So that's about halfway, so we're going to go ahead and take this out and check it. Correction, that was not nearly halfway. But we are going to go ahead and clean this off and then do it again. So to make our lives even easier, we're going to use a ratchet and a socket. And we're just simply going to go back to doing the same exact thing that we were 2 seconds ago. Okay, so now that we have reached that halfway mark, we can pull it out and then test our fitting. And this is exactly why we used the grease. All those metal shavings would have made its way into the oil pan. Clean up the hole a little bit, make sure it's all nice and clear. And now we're going to test our fitting. So you can see that fitting threads in there amazingly, and it goes in very smoothly. So we're going to go ahead and back it out and clean it fully out, and then we're going to chuck some thread sealant on this and torque that down a good bit. Now if I do see leaking issues, I will put JB weld on it and then thread it in, and that should have no leaking problems even if the tab size is wrong. But we'll worry about that if that happens. Now that that is cleared out and there's no more metal shavings, we can actually install our fitting. Okay, so now we can go ahead and thread this in. Okay, so now we want to tighten this down. It doesn't have to be to some crazy torque spec, but we just want to snug it up. That should be good. So let's go ahead and get the turbo on the car so we can figure out what length we want our drain line. After all this time, we can finally do the oil drain for the turbo. I hate fittings and hate plumbing stuff up, especially when it's something like AN where it's not readily available parts. Especially under a time crunch because you're always waiting for these parts and they take forever. But let's go ahead and start assembling our AN drain line. So how AN works is you have two parts of the fitting, and then the line. So this part is going to go over the fitting, just like so, and you're going to start threading it on the line, but you can see I'm turning it the opposite way, and that's because this is a left-handed thread. So you're going to turn it the opposite way than you would think. Now you can use AN wrenches, which are pretty expensive and pretty fancy, but these fittings are aluminum, so when you use a steel wrench like this, it can mess up the fitting and make it look not as good, but honestly I don't care about how my AN lines look that much. And you want to get that fitting all the way up there to the top. Now you're going to take the second part of your AN fitting, which is going to thread in there and spread that pipe apart, getting a really good seal on it. So we slide that in there, and then we just start turning this normally. Now this is just a normal right-handed thread, so it'll start threading in like usual. Now you can do this on the floor. It is a little bit easier to have a vise, so let's go ahead and go over to the vise. Okay, so now we're over here at the very messy, dirty vise. So let's go ahead and start tightening this down. And now we lock that down until we can't tighten it anymore. And that ain't going anywhere, so now we can actually chuck it back on the car. So we're back at the car, and I went ahead and put a 45-degree AN fitting on the bottom side of the turbo. So now we just take our AN line, thread it onto the fitting that we just drilled into our oil pan, and figure out the length, and then cut that. Okay, so we're going to cut here. The electrical tape will also go and help the line from fraying, which will make installing the AN fitting a lot easier. So let's go ahead and cut it. And just like that, we have a cut AN line. So we can go ahead and separate it, take off all this electrical tape, and put on our other fitting. So now it's time to chuck the drain line on the car, make sure it fits. Now I'm just going to loosely bolt it up right now, because the simple factor, I still got to take off the turbo to go ahead and finish up the water lines. And also take off the turbo for like actually installing gaskets, torquing down the turbo manifold, all that good stuff. So we're just going to loosely put it up right now. So that's our drain line done. So as I said, time to pull back off the turbo and finish up our water lines. Now yes, I could do it on the car, but it's just going to be easier taking it off. Okay, so now it's time to add these water fittings to the side of the turbo. And then from these fittings to these fittings, which is just a 90 fitting to then a barbed. But first off, we have to get these on. So we're all out of liquid Teflon, so what we're going to do is just use normal Teflon tape. Now this will work if you're being smart about it. So we're going to go ahead and get a little bit out, and then cut it with our knife to get a straight line. And now we're going to take our fitting, and we're going to press it, leaving about a thread before the Teflon. And now we simply wrap the tape around it. And you do not want this Teflon tape getting into your oil or in your coolant system. So again, we're leaving one thread without any Teflon on it. So we're going to do about 3 turns of Teflon. Now we're just going to cut it, fold those edges around, and now we can thread it in. And then we're going to take the corresponding socket, twist that on, and now we're going to snug it up. Okay, so now that fitting's good, it's not going to leak, we can move on to the next one. So you're going to need 2 15mm wrenches, and we're going to snug down this side with the barbed fitting on it first to make sure this does not leak. Now this is AN, so you don't have to put any Teflon on this. This is self-sealing. We're going to still go ahead and get that a good little snugging up. And then now we can install it on the turbo. And we're also going to give that a good snugging up. Now that these adapters are on, we're simply just going to take the rubber hoses that we got on the car earlier and push them onto these barbed fittings and put a hose clamp on them. And now we have to do one more thing, and that's the oil inlet for the turbo. So I'm using a barbed fitting, and this turbo has an oil restrictor in it already, so we don't have to worry about putting an oil restrictor in the line or in the block. So we have our barbed fitting bolt, and then we have this adapter, which then goes to 4AN, and then we should have a gasket somewhere. I gotta find that real quick. Okay, so I found the crush washer, so we're gonna put that on, and then we will crank that down. Now I'm not gonna do that just yet, because the simple factor of I still wanna get the other line on, but that's all the oil lines done. So that is just about everything done for our turbo. All we gotta do is new coolant, new oil, put back in our transmission, do the boost controller, and then we're done. Besides putting it all back together, but that takes 2 seconds. So really the main part is just putting back in this transmission with the new competition clutch and flywheel. And then this car will be up and ripping again, but now with some power. So go check out Max Speed and Rod's competition clutch and AEM. They're the ones who really helped put together this whole turbo setup. So big shout out to all of them. I'll have all their links in the description down below. And that's all the oil and water lines done, and if you guys have enjoyed this video or learned anything from it, like, comment, subscribe, all that, it means the world to me. And I hope you guys will have an amazing day. See you guys all next time. Peace out.